Hello students. So in our today's module, we'll be studying about the nervous system. Fine. Now students, talking about the human nervous system, it is divided into three main systems. Fine. The first one we have is the central nervous system, then we have peripheral nervous system, and the third one we have is the autonomous nervous system. Need not to go in detail of the peripheral and autonomous. Mainly we will be dealing up with the central nervous system, but we should know what exactly the peripheral nervous system and autonomous nervous system are. Now students, talking about the CNS, that is the central nervous system, you can write it as CNS. It consists of brain and spinal cord, right? The human brain, the most important organ. Okay. Now students, talking about the peripheral nervous system, it consists of nerves, fine, mainly cranial and spinal cord. Spinal nerves, they basically arise from the spinal cord, and cranial nerves, they arise from the brain. All right. And talking about the autonomous nervous system, students, it means self. Self means auto, fine. It regulates the bodily functions, heart rate, digestion, stomach, heart, digestives, and all these things. Now students, talking about the human brain, our human brain is the organ of the body in the head that controls functions like movements, sensation, and thoughts. It has the ability to think and reason. And our brain consists of cerebrospinal fluid, which protects our brain from shocks. Next students, coming on to the human brain parts, and you can see here on your right hand side that we have major three important human brain parts. The first one you can see is the forebrain, then we have midbrain, and then we have hindbrain. Alright students, so these are the three main important parts. Now human brain is divided into three main parts on the basis of their functions and placements. Now we'll be dealing up one by one with all these parts. So you can see here the first one we have is the forebrain, right? So you can see here students in the diagram, it is shown here that the cerebellum, thalamus and hypothalamus, they constitute the forebrain, right? You can see here this one is the cerebellum, this one is the cerebellum, okay, and this one is the thalamus, and hypothalamus is this one. All right, this one is the parietal lobe, occipital lobe, we have temporal lobe and frontal lobes. These are the parts of cerebellum, students. Fine. Now this one is the midbrain. All right, this one is cerebellum, pons and medulla. They constitute the hindbrain here, you can see. And the last part you can see is the spinal cord, very important. So the brain and the spinal cord, they constitute the central nervous system. Fine students. Now talking about the cerebellum, okay, the most important. Now it is greatly folded and it is divided into two halves called cerebral hemisphere. So students, remember this thing, that talking about the structure of the cerebellum, so you can see here that it is divided into two halves. Fine. The first one we have is the right cerebral hemisphere, right hemisphere, and next one we have is the left hemisphere. Fine. Now students, you can see here clearly it is shown in the picture. You can see the pinkish color, it is the right hemisphere, and the purple kind of color, the blue one, is the left hemisphere. So talking about the right one, that is the pink color, it is responsible for the control of the left side of the body. Fine. And is the more artistic and creative side of the brain. So you should know that which part of the brain is more artistic and creative. So what is the answer? Right hemisphere. Okay. And next one we have is the left hemisphere. And the function is it is responsible for the control of right side of the body and is more academic and logic side of the brain. I hope you'll remember this thing. It's important, students. Now, coming on to the function of cerebrum. So, what exactly the cerebrum does? It controls sight, hearing, and speech. Sight, you all know, seeing, hearing, fine, and speech. It controls most of the voluntary muscles. Now, here you should know that what exactly the voluntary muscles, and I think you better know it. So, voluntary muscles that we can control by our will. Okay. Next one we have is the responsible for reasoning, intelligence, and thinking and decision making. So these are the functions that are performed up by the cerebrum. And remember one thing, students, talking about cerebrum. So it has some lobes that I've shown you here. I would like to show you once again. See, can you see here with orange color? I have underlined the parietal lobe, occipital, frontal, temporal, and this much only we have. So these are the lobes of the this forebrain, or we can say the cerebrum. So cerebrum, it includes frontal lobe, which is associated with parts of speech, problem solving, right? Talking about the parietal lobe that helps in perception, movement. Talking about the occipital, it is related to visual processing, and the temporal, recognition of memory, auditory stimuli. Dear students, this cerebrum also includes the sensory areas, the motor areas, and the associative areas. Fine. So, cerebrum includes the lobes and plus these areas. Talking about the sensory areas, basically its main function is to receive the messages. Associative areas is the connection between sensory area and motor area. And talking about motor area, you can see the name itself suggesting the motor means movement. So it is responsible for action of voluntary muscles. Right, students? The next we have is the thalamus. Okay. So these we are discussing about the forebrain, students. Fine. We have already discussed about the cerebrum. The second part of the forebrain we are having is the thalamus. So it is located above the brainstem and between the midbrain. You can see here, this one is the thalamus. So its main function is to receive the impulse from the eyes, ears, skin, and other internal organs and send these impulses to the cerebrum. Okay, so whatever impulses they are being generated, they are being sent up to the cerebrum, which is the main thinking part. And the last part of the forebrain we have is the hypothalamus. So the location is it lies under the thalamus. So you can see this one is the thalamus and this one is the hypothalamus. Okay. So the main function of hypothalamus is that it controls the metabolism. Fine. It regulates body temperature. It regulates water balance and sleep. And talking about the pituitary gland, which is also one of the most important gland, students, talking about its structure, then you can see here it is a P-shaped like structure. Okay, P-shaped. P, you know, mutter, right? And talking about its functions, so hormones secreted by this gland, they are helpful in growth and reproduction. Always remember this thing. Now, did you know, students, that there are no pain receptors in the brain? So, the brain can feel no pain. Okay. Now, coming on to the midbrain. You can see here talking about the midbrain. It is present under the cerebral hemisphere and above the hindbrain. Remember this thing, above the hindbrain. Okay. And it is reduced in humans. It connects the forebrain with hindbrain. Fine, forebrain with hindbrain. And the main function of midbrain is to control the reflex movements of eyes and hearing reflexes. So it coordinates simple movements with sensory information, right? Mainly focus and attention. It controls the arousal and ability to focus our attention. The next we have, students, is There are some important facts. Fine. See, did you know human brain can't create faces? Therefore, when you dream, if you see someone you don't know, you have seen their face before. Now, hindbrain, the last part, you can see here, its location is, it is present at the back side of the brain. Okay, and you can see clearly the different parts of the hindbrain. We have cerebellum, pons, and medulla. Right, students? So, talking about the cerebellum, it is located at the back side of the head, makes 10% of the brain by weight, and the main function performed by the cerebellum is to control the body balance. It corrects the voluntary movements of the body, students, and involved in learning and memory storage and for showing different behaviors. Now, the second one we have is the pons. Fine. Latin word, it is the Latin word which means bridge. Its location is, it is located above the medulla. Okay, it is located above the medulla. You can see here this one is the medulla and this one is the pons. Okay, and this one is the cerebellum. So these are the three parts that constitute the hindbrain. And function is, the function of pons is to control the sleep, control wakefulness, and control the rate of breathing. The next one we have is the medulla oblongata, students. It is the posterior, or you can say the back part or the lower part of the brain, and the most important functions that are being performed by the medulla oblongata is breathing, blood pressure, blood circulation. It controls these functions, fine, heart rate and vomiting. So this was all about the human brain. I hope you all have understood the concept. Thank you, students.